Good evening or good morning, wherever you may be in this big, beautiful world. I'm your host, Bob Motta, and this is November 3rd, 2025. And just a heads up. So this episode is going to be a formal, traditional podcast. So we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to introduce my beautiful and brilliant co-host. And then as we prepare, we will be doing a formal intro for the actual podcast so that Darren can cut all this stuff out in the beginning and he'll just start there. Just to kind of warn you guys, because ultimately we want to throw this on the Defense Diaries / docket feed and have them have this as a bonus episode. So as always, I am joined by my beautiful and brilliant co-host who is muted. What's up? What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. I was just gonna say, wait till you do the formal one. But so I guess we'll what we're gonna do is, we're gonna play the episode, break. I'll ask some questions. We'll keep an eye out for any supers, and then Mandy, I'm assuming, is back here. She can star some good member questions. If you're a Patreon, just put like Pate or
Hey,
P.
Allison.
Hi, Mandy. Before your question, and Mandy can start good patron questions. And hold on, because
So you could not find it on Patreon? It's
No.
definitely there. People are listening.
Yeah, but are they not listening to the Gacy tapes?
No, they're listening to Buried. I mean, the Gacy tapes have been on there. I don't suggest anybody listen to the Gacy tapes. It's a whole, unless you just can't wait. If you can't wait for the new episodes to drop and you're just one of those people.
Well, or if you
that
were
has to
in the
know.
middle, if you were in the middle of the series
I
already.
still say you wait.
Depends how far along you were.
I mean, I don't think it depends. I think you just wait. It's a whole different experience with the tape sound being so much better. It just is. So,
I'm
you
double
can't.
checking. I'm double checking.
It's got to be in there. Did he not answer you, Darren?
No. Yeah, I don't see him.
Okay. That would be crazy if he didn't have him in there. I don't know. All right. Well, at any rate, we'll have to suffer through ads, which will be a good.
No, I'll fast forward them.
Yeah, MD saying Buried is there. You're just not. You don't know how to operate Patreon, obviously.
Apparently.
Which is ironic because you're the one who posted all the shit to Patreon in terms of documents and everything else. It seems like you would.
I see all the Gacy tape episodes, and then it goes right into the docket.
Huh. All right. Well,
actually, I see up to 6.
Whatever. We'll play it with the ads, and that'll be a good.
I am not going to play the actual ads. There's a thing called fast forward and pause. So
I know, but we'll hear them before you can fast forward through them.
We shall see.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Oh yeah.
I'll see how impressed I can be with you for foreseeing the ads coming. Like, unless you have like the markers right in front of you, then I suppose that could be a thing. But all right. So you ready for me to do the
No, because you know what?
intro?
I'm not signed in on podcast online. So I can't. You might as well just do it.
You want me
Really.
to play it?
Yeah, because otherwise I got to figure out my podcast, you know.
All right, so you just give me like an ear tug, like a Carol Burnett ear tug, or
I want you to pause like you'll pick a good place to pause. Pause
or
it.
what happens if there's a place that you want me to pause though? You're the one asking me the questions. However, I am going to ask you some questions. So, um, we'll see. But like if you want me to pause, just like give me some kind of signal and I'll pause it.
I'll go
Instead
like
of
that.
saying, babe, pause. Oh yeah, flip me the bird. That's good. That's super effective. All right. All
Just
right.
kidding, guys.
Let me pull it up. Let's see.
Uh Gigi's listened to up to episode 8. Shocking. Yeah, that was a good one.
It's a good one. It's
Like
a
if
good
I
one.
had to pick one of the first 3 to do this for, I would do it on episode 3 because it was so amazing. But I understand it makes no sense to start, you know.
Yeah, you got to start in the beginning. You got
Yeah.
to start in the beginning. It's like I warn people throughout the first whatever episodes, like, look, if you're just diving into this and you're starting at episode 5, it's like you've missed the first half of a movie. It's like you can't just do it. It's a running narrative. It's a full investigation and it's chronological. So, all right. So I'll do the formal intro, and
All right,
then
but before you do that, get us to where it starts with no commercials. Like don't share it yet. Oh, okay, or do it with us on.
you want me to pull it off and find? Okay, yeah. Hold on. I'll do that then. We're
And I'll talk in the meanwhile.
okay.
We're going to be listening to my very sexy man's very sexy podcast voice, and we'll see if you guys think his podcast voice is different than his YouTube voice. So we're at the house occasionally the kids will be like, "Why are you using your podcast voice?" And Bob will say, "I don't have a podcast voice."
What are you talking about? I'm not using my podcast voice.
Oh
It's I
god,
was
you never
talking
fix
to Tyler Allen, who hosts Minds of Madness. He's a buddy of mine, and like his podcast voice is like full blown podcast voice. Like he doesn't sound anything like his podcast voice. He does that. He's like, I read one sentence at a time and then stop. It must take him to record forever because he's got that. He does the super deep gravelly thing, and I'm like, man, that must take you forever to record. Okay, let me see here.
feels like you're calling him out right now.
No,
No.
no, no.
I kind of need to go grab water.
Oh, really? Well, I'm trying to get this other thing. It's having me sign up too, and I don't
See.
know.
Oh boy, I thought you were ready.
I thought I was too, but people know what to expect over here. I mean, if anybody thought that this was going to be some kind of smooth,
Smooth operation.
like my favorite things are when people send the comments or put comments and they're like,
Why don't you
if you
guys?
guys ran a tighter ship and just, like had all your shit lined up, it would be
We'd
so
be
much
different
smoother.
people.
Yeah.
That's what we'd be.
It's not us, bro.
We'd be not us.
All right,
This is the way we roll.
It's
If
how
you
we
know,
roll.
you know.
All right, let's see. Yeah, I don't. Jeez, can you get on Spotify on your computer?
I think I actually might be able to do that. Not 100%.
Apparently, I don't remember my Apple ID. Apparently,
Because here's the thing: I usually go on the app, even on my computer. So, oh my lord, I am in.
in what?
I'm in Spotify.
Boom.
Boom.
All right, good. All right,
All
so
right,
you do all that. You do
I'm
it,
gonna
find
do
it
it.
where
Now you
it's.
talk, but now I can't get myself some water. I can while it's playing. I can sneak away.
Yes.
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 All right, so you do your intro.
Okay. All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the docket.
No,
What?
this isn't the docket, is it? I think
Yes.
this is welcome to Defense Diaries.
No.
Welcome to-
Eventually, all that's like the docket's going to be on its own feed.
I
So
know,
we're
but I
moving
think
that
that this
off.
should be. Let's take a poll what the people think. I think this should actually be a Buried, brought to you by Defense Diaries bonus episode because we're talking about Buried, and it should go on both Buried and the Defense Diaries feed. Like I think it could actually go on Buried as a bonus because it's behind the scenes episode 1.
So what am I saying? Welcome to Buried or welcome to Defense Diaries?
Buried, brought to you by Defense Diaries.
Okay. All right.
All right, now do
3,
your 1, 2. Yeah,
1. Yeah.
sorry.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Buried, brought to you by Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Motta, and this is a bonus episode that we're excited to bring to you as we go through episode 1 of Buried inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation. And the added feature is that my beautiful and brilliant co-host, Allie, what's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all.
Will be asking me all kinds of questions, behind the scenes stuff, kind of maybe some historical stuff, anything that really comes to her mind to kind of give you guys some insight into what was really an incredible experience for me in making this podcast. And I'm excited to share it with y'all. And I hope that you guys find this episode to be entertaining. So I think without further ado, what we will do is start the first episode. And just to forewarn you, we will be pausing throughout the episode. So if obviously you want to listen to the full episode uninterrupted by us, then subscribe, follow, and go listen. And listen to the whole thing. We are now 8 episodes in, with episode 9 dropping on Tuesday, and then episode 10 dropping on Thursday, and then episode 11 on Saturday. So that's kind of our drop schedule. It was by great demand that we decided to add a third day of drops.
And not only will I be asking questions, but this is a live episode. So we will be taking live questions as well. So this is not going to be your traditional podcast format.
Wow.
So,
yeah, you really had your podcast voice going there, didn't you? Yeah. All right. You ready to fire it up?
All right, here we go.
Sounds good. What's going on? Oh my god.
I had
Oh my god.
it's shit.
Oh my god.
Oh man.
Tech wizardry at its finest.
Oh gosh, just make sure you text Darren that
Oh yeah.
after the intro there's something he's got to remove.
Yeah,
My lord.
I'm assuming he listens to these
I
things.
just don't know because sometimes I hear him and it's like, man, that was horrible. It was in the perfect spot.
All right.
Wait. Stop laughing.
You're doing great, babe.
Yeah. Oh
You are
God.
doing great.
All right, there. Sorry. Love you.
Late December of 1978, in the northwestern suburbs of Chicago. No, it doesn't sound right. 2 detectives pulled over a late model Oldsmobile that contained 2 men. The cops approached the vehicle and instructed the passenger, not the driver, to exit. The officer informed the passenger that he was under arrest for possession of marijuana. The man was booked and was held in custody, and a warrant was issued to search his home in unincorporated Norwood Park. As the suspect sat in wait, police effectuated the warrant on his home and entered looking for evidence. Only they were not searching for drugs. The officers, in fact, were searching for the body of a 15-year-old boy named Robert Peast, who had been missing at that point for 11 days, and what they found in the crawl space of 8213 West Somerdale would send shockwaves throughout the world. That man was serial killer John Wayne Gacy. Welcome to Buried, inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation, presented by Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Motta.
All right, our first pause.
Okay, so you left. It's breaking up. I feel like you're not on the Ethernet. I feel like you're on the Wi-Fi.
No.
Really?
Alright, this is not getting converted into an episode now officially because of all of this, but I am on the Ethernet, and I do not have the Wi-Fi turned on.
Hmm. I don't know. That's strange. It sounded like warbly in the beginning. All right, so here's the first thing I want to talk about that I haven't told. Like Allison's I hope you're not going to tell the same stories over and over. So I'm not going to tell the same stories. So our theme song, which you heard at the very beginning, which if you listen all the way through the end, I always thank all the people that were behind the scenes in terms of producing this podcast. And so that song, which is really probably about 8 minutes long, was written and produced and performed by my brother-in-law, Taras Horolewski, who's an amazing guitar player who once had a band called The Herd, who Alice and I both we just loved that band so much. They were a funk band. So many of the people that have come out of that band are now part of much bigger projects, and my poor brother-in-law Taras is not. So, but I had gone to him and I had asked him, I'm like, hey man, I need an original theme for the podcast, and I want it to be dark and like haunting and see what you can do. So he went into the studio with Ryan Gack, who was mixing and mastering all the sound, and he ended up sending me about 8 different potential theme songs. I think we all kind of listened to them and we all kind of landed on that one. It had that feel that I wanted to have for the podcast, and I wanted it to be original, and you guys, having watched our lives all the time, and you hear our intro song to our lives, that was produced by Darren Wood, who is also a musician, and he can play every instrument, and he's a sound engineer. So he was able to tailor the theme to the podcast in a way that fit in terms of kind of picking the right portions of the song. So I just from the beginning, I felt like that particular theme song really hit the mark as far as what I wanted it to sound like. And I'll talk a little bit more about the relationship between Darren and I, and kind of like this kismet circumstance wherein I knew Darren. He was a close friend of mine beforehand, and when I started the pod, I realized that I had no idea what I was doing tech wise. So we were, I don't know how many episodes in, or I was I had written 2 episodes and I tried to record. I'm like, holy shit. I went to Allie. I'm like, I've got to figure out somebody to produce this thing. I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want it to sound like shit. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, Darren had never popped into my mind. And I remember I was laying in bed right next to Allie. I'm like, Darren, I got to hit Darren up. And so I text him, and, of course he came on board. All right, you can fire it back up. Throughout this season, I'll be playing excerpts from audio cassettes that contain about 15 hours of pretrial interviews between Gacy and his trial attorneys. But aside from a few minutes licensed to A&E for an American Justice episode, have never been heard by anyone other than his lawyers and myself. So you may be asking yourself, how in the hell did this guy get his hands on these tapes? Well, on my 21st birthday in 1990, my father gave me what I consider to be one of the strangest and most unique birthday gifts I've ever heard of anyone receiving. At some point during the party at La Motta in Oak Park, Illinois, where it seems that all of our family celebrations were held, my dad handed me a singular gift that was about the size of a shoebox. I anxiously unwrapped the gift only to find out that, in fact, it was an old shoebox. I can't recall exactly what I thought when I looked down at it, but at that point in my life, I'd been driving around in a rusted-out piece of shit AMC for about a year and a half, so I was rooting heavily for car keys. I recall looking down at the tattered old shoebox, and I noticed 2 words scrawled on the lid. Those 2 words, Gacy tapes. The sight of it took my breath away. I had no idea that he had possessed any Gacy tapes, as he had never mentioned them. I lifted the lid, and contained inside were 15 cassettes dated from February through May of 1979. Neatly stacked, all of them respectively entitled RMM Interview with Gacy. My father took me aside and explained what he had just given me, which was all of his taped interviews with his then client, infamous serial killer, John Wayne Gacy. They were interviews that took place prior to the explosive trial, while Gacy was housed at Cermak Memorial Hospital, awaiting his death penalty trial for the murders of 33 young men. He went on to tell me to hold on to them, and that one day, maybe, I could use them for something. 31 years later, the tapes still in the original box that they were given to me in are now going to be used for something. Out of necessity, despite the fact that I think it's fairly obvious, considering the subject matter, that I need to make a bit of a disclaimer. The material on these tapes is graphic and both sexually and violently explicit. They are also homophobic and misogynistic, so now you've been warned. The content at times is highly offensive and is not for the faint of heart. The months that followed consisted of my buddies relentlessly asking me to listen to the tapes. Finally, I caved. So we went to my apartment, I went in my room, and I grabbed the box from the top shelf in my closet. I reluctantly pulled out the first tape, dated 2/9/79, because I didn't share my friend's morbid curiosity. What I felt was dread.
Okay, now what happened at the Greyhound station?
To the best of my knowledge, I parked on Clark Street, and then after parking on Clark Street, I got out and I was walking around. Just walking around. I had to run with this. It was standing outside there. I just said hello to him, I guess. I don't recall I don't know the conversation.
Why'd you go to that guy? Who possessed you to go up to some guy?
I don't know if he came to me and asked me a question about where the street or what it was. I don't know how the conversation got started.
Do with him?
He was explaining that he had time to kill. I thought I was just fucking around. He said he had time to kill.
You remember that specifically?
Yeah, because he said something about he had missed his bus or he was late over waiting for a bus until noon.
What do you look like?
I think about 19 or 20 years old, blonde headed. He had I think Levi's on and sort of like a lumberjack jacket type thing.
Remember what color it was?
And a large belt buckle on.
You remember what color the jacket was?
Blue and white checks or green and white checks. I don't recall.
Did he have a mustache?
No,
Was
blonde.
he wearing glasses?
No. Blonde headed with blue eyes.
What kind of a shirt did he have on?
I think a flannel shirt.
Do you recall?
No.
Long hair, short hair?
Short hair. It's something like Motta's hair.
What was his name?
I don't know.
What were you wearing?
I don't recall. I don't know.
What car were you driving down there?
It would have to be a green Oldsmobile Space Wagon.
Do you remember? Was that the car you had in 1972?
No, I don't know. I think it's a green. I think, yeah, because I think I still had the first old from you that I got since I come out of the institution.
Were you drinking before you met this guy?
I was at my aunt's house, so I had a drink
Do
there.
you think you were at your aunt's house?
Yeah,
Did you stop anywhere between your aunt's house, your house, and the bus station?
no,
What about drugs? You taking any drugs?
no, not that I know.
What happened?
He said he had time to kill. I said, well, if you want, so I'm just cruising around. If you want to ride, you can ride with me. And when we started riding around, I believe I started the conversation asking him if he ever gotten into sex or ever gotten blown or that. And would he like to get blown? He said, yeah. I said, well, you've ever been blown by a guy, and didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it.
I want to ask you something. Is there anything that you remember specifically about picking him up, the car, anything specifically that we can tie a date into?
No,
Remember the car you
the only chronological order that I can give you the date from is that it had to be right after New Year's. I know
Now, remember what I told you about assumptions, John? You're assuming you were
Okay.
in that green station wagon, right?
I think that's what kind of a car I had.
Do you remember specifically? No. Right now, do you remember?
No.
Do you remember getting out of the car
Yeah,
and
because
talking to this
The
guy?
reason why is I had several green Oldsmobiles. And I think I had one blue one, and then I went to black.
So you reconstruct.
I'm trying to reconstruct.
Do you remember specifically getting out of the car and talking to this guy?
No, it could possibly be that I was still sitting in the car, and he came up to the car.
You don't remember.
I don't know.
Didn't you mention to me on a prior occasion that he had a key to a locker?
Yeah, in his pocket.
Did you remember that specifically?
Yeah, because that was actually, he said it was in his pocket.
No, I don't hear the rest of the story. About the guy. Start talking about sex and then what happened.
We went out to my house. He said he was hungry. Something about being hungry. That he didn't mind getting into something like that, but he was hungry. Came out to my house and I fixed him something to eat. And we sat around eating, and I think we had a couple drinks.
Yeah.
This had to be around, I'd say, 2 o'clock in the morning.
So you
Two or
do
three.
remember having drinks then.
Yeah, I think I drank that.
He was there with you.
Yes, out of the house. Then we went to the rear bedroom with the green carpeting, which would be the back bedroom, not the present one, which was the master bedroom, the red carpet.
Is there any reason you went to the bedroom? You didn't do it in the living room or somewhere else in the house?
I don't know.
You
We went into a bedroom where there was twin beds.
It sticks out in your mind. You remember that.
Yeah, there was twin beds in the room because that was my room. The front bedroom was my mother's at that time. See, and she had a double bed. But we went to the room where there was twin beds. Because I'm assuming, maybe I thought that my mother might come home in the morning. And that's why we were in my bed, because he could go in one bed and I could go in the other. We both got into oral copulation. After it was over, I think I just fell off asleep.
Think.
Yeah, I had to. Because I was laying in bed and I woke up and I seen him come in the room with a knife.
Where were you when you woke up?
In bed. My bed. The one part that's closest to the window.
Where did you have sex?
In the same bedroom. On the other
Your
bed where
bed?
he was sleeping.
The other bed.
Yeah.
Now, you said when you...
Because after we had the sex, he lay down on the extra bed and I lay down.
What knife? Did you see the knife? What kind of knife?
From the kitchen, the knife that I cut the sausage with.
Where was that? In the kitchen?
Laying on the counter in the kitchen.
And he was just coming at you with that knife. Were you saying
Yeah.
anything?
No, because I think I startled him.
Where was he when you first saw him with the knife? How close to you was he?
About 2 feet from me.
Almost right
He
on
was
you.
touching you?
Yeah.
Over you on the bed?
He was
Coming at you like
coming
this?
at me with that.
Is it possible that you weren't waking up from a sleep, but were waking up from a stupor? That you had been conscious,
But
but
that's possible. I don't know.
You get violent with this guy during sex and all?
No.
is there any reason he'd come
There
at
was
you
no
with a
reason.
knife that you could think of? Anything?
The only
that
thing
happened
I
the night
could think
before?
of. The only thing no. We had oral sex, and after it was over, we both were, he was tired. We were both going to go to sleep.
What was he wearing when he had the knife in his hand coming towards you?
I think all he had on was his Levi's.
And what did you do?
I jumped up and I wrestled with him in the bedroom and pushed him out of the bedroom into the hall, and then from the hall into the front bedroom.
Where was the knife from?
In his hand, I was holding his one hand. I got slashed from him, and I was able to knock him down.
Where
knock him
you
off
slashed?
his feet, on the left wrist.
How were you holding him?
Right.
His
Well,
arms? Were you holding his arms?
yeah, I grabbed
You
his arm.
grabbed his
immediately.
arm, as you said, the knife was coming down on you. You didn't have his arm already. You grabbed it as it was.
Yeah. Well, when I flew out of bed, because I knocked him off his feet. I wrestled him all the way into the front bedroom. There, and I think while I was wrestling with him, I got stabbed. And that's what made me mad. Because I took the knife, I think I stabbed him in the chest 4 or 5 times.
How did you get the knife?
After I knocked him off balance,
And you said
I pounced
after
down
knocked
on
him
top
off
of him.
balance, you were holding his arm and he slashed
Well,
your wrist.
Yeah, because he came down with the knife.
Well, how did you get the knife out of his hand?
But when he lost balance and I knocked him over, when I fell on top of him, when I fell on top of him, the knife moved his hand.
This was in
How were you
another
on
bedroom.
What position?
Over my knees and his stomach and chest. Grabbed the knife from him and
This is after you had wrestled into the other bedroom.
yes,
Then
front
you
bedroom.
fell down and you were on top of him.
Yes.
Did you have clothes on then?
Did I have clothes on? I think this underwear.
Did he have clothes on?
Yeah, I think he had his Levi's on. Just his pants. No shirt, no shoes or socks.
So he wasn't dressed to leave.
No. Because I think he was saying that he was sorry. He was sorry. He didn't mean that he wasn't going to hurt me or I don't know.
You stabbed him 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Did he appear to die immediately, or was he still alive? Was he breathing, or did he appear to be lifeless after the
No,
stabbing?
I think after the first or second stabbing, all you could hear was the gargling of blood.
So what we heard, was that you pausing?
It was. I didn't know if I should let you continue before I pause because you're about to explain what we heard.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, so Gacy had 2 defense attorneys that handled his trial. That was Sam Amaranti and my father, Bob Motta Sr. No other lawyers handled that case. He had obviously multiple appellate attorneys after he was convicted and sentenced to death that, you know, throughout the years they tried to get the death penalty overturned. And oddly enough, what we end up uncovering in this particular podcast through our investigation was never uncovered by any of his appellate attorneys, which is shocking a little bit. But maybe not. I don't know. Like, I don't know that they ever interviewed the cops like I did. But so what you're hearing here is the first tape. And this was the only portion of the tape that I had ever listened to prior to digitalizing all of the old tapes in preparation to make the podcast. So this was when you hear me talking about, you know, that story when my friends were all, you know, morbidly interested in listening to the tapes. They're like, oh, we want to hear the tapes, want to hear the tapes. I had like 2 or 3 of my friends with me and we went up to, you know, to my apartment and we threw the first tape in and we listened to about that, like almost exactly that portion of the tape. Now, when we started the podcast, oh yeah, digitizing. So when we started the podcast, I ended up, you know, going into it with the concept that I was going to play the tapes and I didn't know initially how I wanted to play them. The one thing that I knew is that I didn't want this to be some kind of Gacy fanboy, Gacy biopic or Gacy bio podcast where I'm going through his whole history, because everybody that's followed the case, anybody that knows about the case, anybody who's read or watched the documentaries, they know that because that's always what they focus on. What I really wanted to focus on was the victims and the investigation into Gacy. And ultimately, what I wanted to find out, what I really wanted to figure out was how Desplaines was able to get him in such a short period of time where the Chicago Police Department let him operate for 6 years, basically unencumbered. So, you know, that was kind of the mindset going in. And, you know, I told Darren, look, man, you know, I'm going to kind of leave it up to you to pick portions of the tapes, because Darren was the one cleaning the tapes because they were in just brutal condition. They were tapes that were recorded on a, you know, old school rectangular recorder, basically the push button thing with one small microphone, which my father always had pointed towards him. So it was harder to hear Gacy and it was easier to hear my father which was irritating to both Darren and I, especially Darren. But he listened to the tapes so often, and we had transcripts of all the tapes. And so I would kind of go through and pick out portions that I felt would fit a particular episode once I landed on the concept of exactly how this thing was going to go. And I figured out, okay, I'm going to get all the file in terms of the investigation file from the Des Plaines police and what I could get from the Chicago police, which was not much because not much existed. And then from that point forward, I was going to go chronologically through the investigation.
All right. And then so we'll continue on and play on, but what I'm hearing and what I think people will hear now that they've heard that story, there's certain things that you'll indicate throughout the episodes is going to happen next. But because this was, and I guess I'm jumping ahead now, but because this was like a sort of a live investigation, a live podcast as it was being created, things changed and then you didn't necessarily do those things. Like at
Right.
first you had thought you might play the tapes for the officers and
Right.
get their response to it. But then when you started interviewing them, you were getting new information and you were developing a new, storyline for the whole Gacy investigation. And like you said, sort of decided you wanted to take a different focus. So it's interesting now that that when you're sort of paying attention to the episode and you hear something Bob might say and or talk about doing, and you're like, you have to think, I wonder if he ends up doing that, because I know he sort of changed direction as he was preparing, producing, and recording all of
Right.
that.
And the part of that made that have to happen was typically you will have 6, 8, 10 episodes in the can. Like if you're talking about a Wondery podcast where they've got them all in the can and then they release them weekly. This was an investigation that was contemporaneous with us releasing each episode. So meaning I would go out, Darren and I would go out, we'd interview old cops. And that week I would prepare the script. We'd go down, record it, and then Darren would mix and master it. And by the time I figured out pretty quickly, actually, probably by mid-second episode, I'm like, all right, this is the route that I'm going to take. Yeah, the concepts that I had early on were completely abandoned because they just didn't make sense in the context of what I was planning on doing moving forward.
Right. All right. So we're going to pick up with Bob explaining what we just heard as far as that first Gacy clip. Here we go.
Heard there is Gacy talking about the first young man he murdered. When I was 21 and listening with my buddies, I realized immediately that I was right, and listening to the tapes had been a bad idea, as it only took one short clip to make my skin crawl. 29 years passed before I even thought of listening to them again, and that was out of necessity to create this podcast. When I listened to the tapes in their entirety a couple of years ago, I felt much differently than I did at the age of 21. I felt that they had a historic significance, albeit a horrific one, but historic nonetheless, and that keeping them packed away in that shoebox was doing a disservice to the public. I don't know that anything like these tapes have ever been heard, but based on my research, I don't think so. Before we go any further, I'd like to tell you a bit about myself. I'm married with 4 kids. My wife Allison happens to also be my law partner, a subject which truly deserves its own podcast. And if you know us, you know that's true. I'm a practicing criminal defense attorney of 20 years in Illinois, and it's my hope that I will bring an entirely new element to this podcast, as I have a comprehensive understanding of criminal procedure and trial work. Thus, I will be diving into the intricacies of these tapes and of the trial itself from that perspective. You see, over the past 40 years, since around the age of 11, people have asked me how the hell my father could defend such a depraved and awful human being. I would explain to them that my father, Bob Motta Sr., and Sam Amaranti weren't arguing that he hadn't committed the crimes. Quite to the contrary, they employed the ultimate defense of last resort, which is the insanity defense, in order to spare their client's life. That's a very tall order, considering that we were talking about easily the most reviled man on the planet at that time. The question was not whether Gacy was insane. The real question was, could the defense convince the 12 people that had been selected to sit in judgment that the monster should live? I've thought long and hard over the years on how these tapes could be best used. I previously negotiated 2 separate deals to the precipice of contract, one with outstanding documentarian Joe Berlinger and the other with A&E. Ultimately, I decided to pass on both of those deals, as I felt then, as I do now, that much more of the content of these tapes would be heard without an agenda in the form of a podcast. 43 years later, I'm releasing the contents of these never-before-heard tapes to you, the public, and I hope to do so in the most interesting way possible. I want to be clear, I'm in no way, shape, or form going to be defending the actions of that horribly twisted man. I will, however, be taking a much closer look at the defense that was used in that trial, and how tricky the insanity defense would be to employ with this particular man as the client. The episodes will consist of interviews of many of the main players in the case, the playing of the tapes themselves, and what I anticipate will be a lot of very fascinating conversations regarding the contents of the tapes and how what he said back then to his lawyers affected their ability to defend him from himself. Keep in mind that the people I will be interviewing have never heard these tapes either, and all of them will be taking something different away from hearing them. This podcast is going to be your one full price admission ticket to join me behind the curtain to experience what it was like to defend John Wayne Gacy. I realize at this point that many of the listeners may not have a firm grasp on exactly what the insanity defense is. So it makes sense for me to explain it up front, considering that the topic will be a running theme throughout this podcast. In Illinois, in 1980, the statute read as follows. 6-2A of the Criminal Code of 1961 provides the following. A person is not criminally responsible for their actions if at the time of such conduct, as a result of mental disease or mental defect, they lack substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality of their conduct or to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law. Okay, so there's that, but what's the translation? Well, first and foremost was to be understood about using the insanity defense in any criminal case is that by operation of law, the defendant is admitting that they have committed the crime or crimes in question. A good comparison to help crystallize the concept is the defense of self-defense. Say, for instance, that you are arrested for battery because you punched someone. Battery is defined as a physical act that results in a harmful or offensive touching. So if your side of the story is that you didn't punch anyone, well, then self-defense is not available to you as an affirmative defense because you are saying that you didn't hit anyone. So in turn, you are claiming actual innocence. Now, if you tell the cops, yeah, I punched them because they punched me first. In this scenario, you are admitting that you made physical contact, but that it was justified because they attacked you first and you were merely defending yourself. So if the cops charge you with battery anyway, at trial, you would argue, yes, I hit him, but it was in self-defense. So the same theory applies with the insanity defense. You are admitting that you committed the crime. In this case, yes, I killed the 33 young men, but the diseased condition of my mind would not allow for me to conform to the law. That's the insanity defense. If you need more clarification, email us at insider@defensediaries.com, and I'll do my best to clarify it further. As a bit of a heads up, moving forward through the series, when you hear this sound, I will at that point be playing a portion of the tapes. We have done all we can to clean up the sound on the recordings in terms of trying to minimize background noise and the hissing of the tapes themselves. All in all, the sound is pretty damn good considering their age and how they were originally recorded.
All right, so a couple of things I want to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what episode? Because there's something, one of the things that I love about Buried and about the Gacy tapes was it's your favorite time. It's my favorite time, which you obviously had not started doing yet because you didn't do it there. You usually do it when you start to talk about the law. Was it you or Darren that came up with it? When did you come up with it? How did you come up with it? Because I always loved that I don't know. I just thought it was so cute. Maybe it's because I just think you're adorable as it is, but I think a lot of people actually do find it like really like a fun thing that you do. So I'm wondering, do you remember like when you decided to do that and how you came up with it?
Yeah, it was definitely me. Darren, in terms of the writing of the podcast, had nothing to do with any of it.
Well, no, I know that, but sometimes he had, ideas and,
Well, what
I didn't know.
aside from his massive contribution in making it sound the way it sounds, which is amazing,
And picking parts of the tapes, he did that a lot.
he did that a lot. He put the underlay of music, which I know some people like. I'll occasionally get a complaint about the music, the underlay of the music, that it's too loud and it's distracting. And they're like, "Hey, could you remove that?" I've gotten emails. Darren's gotten emails, and no, they're like, "We're never going to do that." It's a mood thing. It really is. And I think that if you were to hear it without it, you'd understand why it's in there. So just kind of address that thing. But as far as it's your favorite time, it's my favorite time, I think I was in probably like episode 3, because you remember I would come up and then I would write these scripts. So I'd have all of the documents, all of the police reports, everything that I was using for a particular episode out. And, you know, to your credit, when you told me when I was starting a podcast, and I'm like, I'm not gonna lean in to the whole lawyer thing. Like it's one of the reasons I want to leave the law. And you're like, are you out of your fucking mind? Like you have to, you're like, that's your thing. Like you have to have that in there. I quickly realized that, as usual, you were right. And that, what I should do with it, because I thought it would be something that's not done in true crime, especially in the podcast form, not so much because you have a lot of law tubers these days. But when I was starting this, law tube wasn't what it is now. I decided, okay, I want to make the law and the criminal justice system more accessible to people that aren't attorneys, for people that enjoy trial watching or enjoy watching documentaries and just love true crime. And they're hearing things that they don't necessarily understand, that I was going to break it down in a way that lay people would understand it clearly. And so I'm like, all right. And whatever episode that is, like 3, 2, 3, 4, I don't know. Like it just popped into my head. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do something cute. And I'm going to be like, it's going to be an intro of kind of like a criminal law, like tiny little class, or I'm going to give an example, a specific thing. And I get more specific as I go through the podcast in terms of kind of like narrowing down. Because my first couple of it's your favorite time, it's my favorite time, it's whatever time, were pretty generic. But as I continued to progress through it, and I had specific concepts that I wanted to explain to people, I would then change it to that at the end of it. But to me, it was something that was necessary in the podcast, because I wanted people to be able to draw different things from our podcast than they do from your typical true crime podcast, wherein, they're just regurgitating a story that they've either read about or saw about in a documentary. Maybe they've gotten some FOIAs, maybe they haven't, I don't know. But this was a whole different thing, and I wanted to be able to impart on people kind of the skill set that we learn as being defense attorneys, in terms of researching, in terms of being able to dig into police reports and look for things in a different type of way than the average person may look at it and say, all right, this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. So that was kind of the genesis of it. And as I was reading through the reviews early on, I was seeing a lot of people saying that they love that concept, so that it was something that I, made a point to continue to do that throughout the series.
And Cody in Tennessee, one of our live listeners here, he says that started it's your favorite time, it's my favorite time in episode 3, which is basically what you thought. So
Awesome.
why don't we tell the listeners what is different about the law as it stands today?
Well, why don't you tell them?
Okay, sir. So the law in Illinois, as far as the insanity defense, no longer has an aspect of you cannot control your behavior, that you are mentally ill and you have a compulsion and you don't have the ability to stop. And it only focuses on a mental defect or illness, that you do not understand the difference between right and wrong. So, you think that you're killing um I didn't want to use the demon.
The Lori Vallow example.
Right. I used to use that one a lot, but I'm like, I don't want to use that one. But like if you have some sort of delusion where you don't think what you're doing is illegal or wrong, then it could be justified, or it could be fall into an insanity defense. But if you just have a compulsion and you can't control your behavior, you do not have the ability to conform your behavior to the law, does not apply. In most states, there are still some states that do have that arm of the insanity defense, but not in Illinois.
Yeah, and to your point, if Gacy was happening now, if he had been arrested, say last week, and they were going to put him on trial, they wouldn't have been able to bring the insanity defense at all because of the fact that Gacy clearly knew what he was doing was illegal, in the sense that, he evaded law enforcement for so long and went to great lengths to do so. So, like he clearly understood what was criminal and what was not. So it just would have been a thing where he wouldn't have been able to employ that defense. And it's, as we get through, and I'm not going to get into a deep discussion about it because I talk about it at length in the podcast in terms of whether or not Gacy was on board with the insanity defense. And, ultimately there's quite a few confrontations between my father and Gacy as those tapes progress, wherein, my father knew that they were going to employ this defense immediately upon hearing the story. That's one thing that they definitely got accurate in The Devil in Disguise when they're showing that scene between my dad and Sam. And my dad's like, look, this is 100% an insanity defense case. And Sam's like, oh yeah, for sure. That was accurate because they knew immediately that was the way that this thing had to go. But, as far as, the laws that exist now, yeah, they wouldn't be able to do it the way they did it back then. And I mean, it wasn't effective then, but when you guys get deep into the podcast and you hear my father's opening statement, wherein it's really an argument, because the way that it was shaking out, Amarante was going to be doing the closing, my father was going to be doing the opening, and Sam didn't have the grasp of the insanity defense like my father did. So my father really took the opportunity, and Judge Garippo really allowed for this to take place more than most judges would, in terms of this wasn't your typical opening statement, because my father was really arguing why the insanity defense it should be employed in this case, and why they should find him not guilty by reason of insanity in the case. It truly was an argument, and he did that way. Judge Garippo was phenomenal. And in a little aside, his grandson, after I dropped the first 2 episodes of Buried, emailed me. Judge Garippo's grandson, he happens to live in a suburb, and he's a practicing attorney, and he just wanted to reach out to me and tell me how much he appreciated the podcast and how much he loved it. And I think we're going to end up having lunch, which would be a really, really cool thing for me. So I just wanted to kind of add that little aside. I thought that was pretty neat. So let's see.
And before we jump back in, one of our members, Jessica,
It was just
Bonetti, 36, asks, did you obtain the tapes when he was still alive? My husband was like, isn't this attorney-client privilege? I don't know how to answer because I didn't think it was.
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually I address it specifically in the podcast itself, but no, I was 21. Gacy was, well, let me do that math. Let's see. He was executed in 94. I was born in December of 69. So
yes, he was alive.
He was, he was just, the execution was just coming, but it didn't really matter. First and foremost, privilege survives death. Okay. So it doesn't matter if your client's gone, they still have the privilege. But what had happened here is that Gacy had waived privilege because that was how he was anticipating my father and Amarante getting paid for the case. Because
additional money he had paid.
well, yeah, like you have to remember they were both retained when they had no idea that there were going to be 33 victims and that what the case was going to be. I mean, the uncovering of the victims took months before they were able to find the kids that were in the river and the last bodies on the property, because not all of them were in the crawl space. So at the end of it, yeah, they were going to, I mean, typically this type of defense where you're hiring private counsel, which both my father and Sam were, they were not appointed public defenders. They were hired. And, I mean, this is like a $2 million case if you're getting two attorneys to try this case for you, because it's a practice killer. It will, and both my father and Sam had basically just hung their shingles for their own law firm. So, that was a rough start if you're trying to build a business for yourself, to basically have one client that you're going to be handling because it's going to take up all your time, which this case did for the better part of a year.
And real quickly, will you tell the story that basically ends with, so it's like getting your lottery ticket, winning the lottery, but washing the ticket in the machine.
Oh, yeah. So ultimately, they did sign a contract. So, and we have a tape which we did not include in the podcast itself, but that we have the sound, and it's Sam and my father and Gacy talking, and they're talking about like the book deals and the movie deals, and Gacy's like, oh, I think these are worth like $10 million. It's like super disturbing shit to like hear Gacy like bartering and negotiating what he thinks, his horrific life story and the story of this case would be worth down the road. But ultimately they end up signing a contract, and I believe that Norman Mailer was signed on to write the book, who had written Executioner Song. And I forget who had signed on to produce the movie. At any rate, as that thing was progressing and they signed it, I think it was $1 million to each guy. And at that point, after it got out to the public that this thing had been signed, I think probably by Sneed, who was the local columnist, the Peast family was very upset, and understandably, thinking that anybody would be able to make money off their son's death. They talked about suing, and I think that they filed suit. Ultimately, they were allowed to do it because of the Son of Sam laws, but it scared everybody off. Like movie producers and authors are not inviting lawsuits into their lives. So ultimately that contract was voided. And that's, like I always talk about, my father's mind. He's like, oh, I'm going to get my fees out of this. I'm going to get paid for all my work. And ultimately the thing vanishes into thin air. And it really kind of put my father in a tailspin for a long time, because whatever Gacy had financially in terms of in his bank was not nearly enough to pay 2 lawyers for handling a case like this. And, it was a pretty devastating event for my father, just in terms of he didn't end up getting paid what he should have been paid to handle a case like this, especially when you're talking about just how much work goes into it. I mean, it's like one of those things. And it was a lesson that we learned when we handled the Garcia case. I mean, you do way more work than you're getting paid for if you're not getting exactly what you should be getting paid, in terms of trying to estimate how much time you're going to spend on a case. And, and it was kind of the same thing on that case for us. So.
All right, let's continue on.
The tapes have been fully transcribed, and if there's a word or a phrase that you simply cannot make out, we will be posting the pertinent portions of the transcripts on defensediaries.com. This will be done for each and every clip of tape that is played throughout the series.
How many people would you say that you brought to your house in the past 5 years, Jen, that, are still alive?
Roughly, yeah. Maybe 400 or 500.
Well, why the hell, why are some dead and why are others alive?
Because, like I said before, some of those, the ones that were killed with threats of violence or blackmail or shit like that. I think that, and I'm not positive, but I'm only surmising.
Specifically,
No, but
remember
Bob, I might be just surmising it, but some of them that were killed were at my house more than once. In other words, once they came and participated, second time they came back with blackmail. And rather than pay the blackmail, I eliminated it.
Do you remember that specifically?
No.
For those of you who are listening but may not be familiar with Gacy's frightening and grotesque story, here's the Cliff Notes version. As a young adult, he lived in Waterloo, Iowa from 1966 until he was arrested and convicted on sodomy charges in 1968. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He ended up serving only 18 months of that 10 years because he was a model prisoner. Upon his release, he moved back to Illinois in 1970. He got married, he started a contracting business, and he bought a house in Norwood Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. He lived in that house up until the date of his arrest in December of 1978. During a 6-year period from 72 through 78, Gacy went on to murder 33 young men. He packed the crawl space of his home until there was simply no more room to put the bodies. All told, the police unearthed 27 bodies from Gacy's crawl space, 1 from under the barbecue pit, and 1 victim buried under the concrete floor in the garage. There were 4 more victims attributed to Gacy who were disposed of in the Des Plaines River. Over the years, he'd been tagged with many monikers as his notoriety grew, but the one that stuck is the Killer Clown. You see, as a moonlighting gig, he would don full clown makeup and attire, and he'd be paid to entertain at children's parties or corporate events. All the while, when he wasn't clowning around, he was amassing a burial site under his home that was filled with his victims. All of Gacy's known victims were young men, many of which who had lost their way and were out hustling on the streets as male prostitutes or slinging drugs to survive, and some who were just well-adjusted young men from good homes that Gacy had lured to his house of horrors under the pretense that he was going to employ them in his contracting business. The one common denominator for all of these young men was that once they entered his home, they never came out. As I stated earlier, Gacy was arrested on December 22nd of 1978. I remember that night vividly as I was visiting my father from Colorado for the holidays when the story broke on the 10 o'clock news. My father, my uncle, and myself watched in horror as the camera delivered the shocking footage of body after body being carried out of the bungalow-styled house in Norwood Park. At some point during the night, they interviewed a young man who the news stated was Gacy's lawyer. That was Sam Amoranti. Upon seeing this, my dad stood up from his seat and stated excitedly, "I know him. I wonder if he needs help on the case," which is literally a question only a defense attorney would ask. He was pacing the room while in thought. Now, this was obviously long before email and cell phones, text messaging, this was before fax machines. So as my uncle and I wildly encouraged him to reach out to Sam, he decided that on the following day, he would send Sam a Western Union telegram, which he did. And in fact, Sam did need the help to handle what at the time was called the case of the century. The Gacy case has been such a large and strange part of my life, and because of that, I have a more personal viewpoint on the case than most. The interviews that I'll conduct throughout the course of the Gacy tape season will reflect that personal angle. I'm not an outsider who has researched the case and am now regurgitating my findings. In my opinion, that's been done ad nauseum. The fascinating aspect of these taped interviews, as compared to any others that you may have heard, is threefold. First is when they were recorded. which was 2 months and some change after his arrest and before his trial was to begin. Quite simply, there's a massive difference between the mindset of the killer depending on when he or she is being interviewed. Every interview I've seen or heard with Gacy, or most serial killers for that matter, have taken place post-conviction, meaning that they've already gone to trial and they've been sentenced to either death or life in prison. Why does this matter? Well, it matters in the sense that if the trial has taken place, the defendant has been convicted, their respective mental focus is immediately shifting to the filing of appeals, because frankly, that is their last hope at avoiding death or spending the rest of their natural life in a cage. The reality, having taken hold in the mind of the killer, changes everything. It becomes a matter of survival. When we begin to listen to the tapes, you'll hear Gacy duck, dodge, and weave as he tries to outmaneuver his attorneys. He's on the defensive, coming off as earnest in his answers, but it becomes abundantly transparent in the interviews as they go on that he is positioning himself so that certain defenses to the crimes appear to exist, including, believe it or not, actual innocence. The second difference is who conducted the interviews. In this case, it was his trial attorneys, not his appellate lawyers, who are dealing with a convicted man who will say anything that he believes will work towards the ends of sparing his life. These are not recordings made by a private investigator, a journalist, or a documentarian after the fact, after trial. They are conducted by his attorneys who are doing everything in their power to prepare a defense that will preserve his life, which Gacy fully understands. These interviews become confrontational as his lawyers challenge his answers to pointed questions in a way that no one else on the planet was in a position to do. Gacy was narcissistic, sociopathic, and smart. He always thought himself to be the smartest guy in the room. Finally, these interviews are conducted under the protective shield of attorney-client privilege, which Gacy eventually waived with Sam Amoranti, which is how we are able to listen to them now. Like many serial killers, their sociopathy allows them to not only seek but crave fame and notoriety based solely on their heinous actions. Gacy was no different, and frankly, was more twisted in this respect than most. The average citizen would be mortified to have their misdeeds published for the world to see. With the massive leaps in technology and the speed in which information is disseminated today, if you are arrested, by the next day, it's on the internet, in most cases permanently. With respect to my clients that I've defended over the years, this fact is typically the second biggest concern next to beating the case. This was not a concern for Gacy, as he basked in his infamy the way an ordinary person basks in the sun on the first warm day after a long, cold winter. If you visit our website at defensediaries.com, you'll find a mugshot that I posted. Those photos were taken within hours after he'd been arrested for possession of marijuana, which was a pretextual arrest because at that point they liked him for the murder of Robert Piest, his last victim. Yet there he is, knowing that he has 27 bodies buried in the crawl space under his home, with a big shit-eating grin plastered on his face. That tells us all we need to know about who and what we are dealing with here. And that is evil incarnate.
So I wanted to ask you, as far as, Gacy and how he comes off on the tapes overall. I mean, what is the biggest thing that really stuck with you?
Definitely his lack of remorse was the most chilling part. Because like I said, I hadn't listened to them all. And when I finally did, when we were digitizing them, it was so chilling to just hear him talking about, multiple homicides that he committed, just so matter of factly and with absolutely no remorse and absolutely no thought as to the incredible amount of damage he had done to so many people, because he just wasn't capable of thinking about that kind of thing. Like this guy never talked about, like, I think late in the season, I think that there's one clip where he talks about John Zick's mother and that he had felt bad for her, and that he had tried to talk to her at some point, but just his complete lack of humanity was so stunning to me that you really kind of understand that this guy just wasn't like the rest of us. This guy was broken in a way that the rest of us just can't really fathom. Like I can't, I'm such an empath that I cannot contemplate doing what he did, let alone doing what he did. But then after having done it, to feel no remorse, no sadness, nothing. I mean, the guy was devoid of any kind of real feeling at all. And it really it shook me. It really did.
Yeah, and along those same lines, what really, I guess, shook me as well, and it's like I said, along the same lines as you're saying, is his ability to rationalize it as he does over and over on these tapes, and to say, once they were buried, what was there to think about? But he said they were asking for it and they're homosexuals. What do you mean? It doesn't matter that I killed them. They're homosexuals. And that ability to rationalize it and just be so upfront about the fact that he felt nothing because they weren't worthy of life, which is just stunning from someone who was a homosexual, but denying that he was a homosexual and somehow saying that he was bisexual, and that that was, I guess, a bisexual is worthy of life in his mind and a homosexual was not. But Kim Gutierrez, one of our members listening, asks Bob, did this case cause any PTSD for your father?
I would have to say yes.
Most assuredly, yes. He
You
doesn't
know,
even like to talk about it still. And I'll tell a story right now. As you'll find out, Bob had both his father and the lead prosecutor perform respectively their openings and closings. And when Bob Sr. performed his opening, he was brought to tears. And I think it was just that it was the first time he could sit with his thoughts and be back in that case where he was able to like really feel for the victims, as opposed to have to stay in this neutral role that's devoid of feeling, that's just focused on his job and doing his job the way he's supposed to. So when you're the lawyer, you never get to connect with like the horror of it all. You have to sort of keep yourself detached in such a way. So he was brought to tears while he was trying to perform his opening. Um, so I think he really does have some PTSD from it. He still doesn't like to talk about it, and surprisingly, anytime that you're the lawyer for someone who gets put to death, even if you think that they deserve the death sentence, that takes a pretty big toll on its own accord as well, in addition to everything else that took place with this defense.
yeah. I mean, there's yeah. I mean, and it's like you said, it's clear even now, even when I was counting on him going into the podcast to be able to really delve into his mind. And, I was quick to find out that it was really, really hard for him to be able to do that. I mean, he was chalking it up to, oh, I can't remember so much about it, which I'm sure is true to a certain extent. But I also know that there's an aspect of it where he just was not really up for talking about it, because I think it damaged him in a lot of different ways. And I think that this case haunted him really throughout the rest of his career, and really still haunts him. Like sitting with him watching that show, I mean, for the next few days after, maybe week after, he kept coming up saying I couldn't sleep, or when I did sleep, I kept having dreams about, the case and that show. He's like, that show brought up so many different memories for me. that it was a hard watch for me. So yeah, I think that it's safe to say that it definitely left him damaged. I don't know that he's ever been diagnosed with PTSD, but I find it hard to believe that he doesn't suffer from it. Because it's like you're sitting there thinking about the concept of sitting on a bed in a hospital that is attached to the Cook County Jail, interviewing this guy that had done all these things. And like Allison said, like trying to remain detached, trying to remain professional the whole time, realizing that you have a job to do, and trying to push that to the side in terms of that battle with your own internal morality, and when you come up to breathe after the case is over, you begin to understand, I think, more fully just who you were dealing with on a much deeper level
Right.
than you might during the actual preparation for the case.
Right. And speaking of that about being detached, so many of you know, and some of you don't, Bob and I handled another serial killer case with Bob Sr. We brought him in to try the case with us. And one of the victims in that case was a young boy. And I was having a very hard time. I would not look at the pictures of the little boy, of the body, of the crime scene. I couldn't do it. And Bob Sr. sort of barked at me one time when I wouldn't look or I looked away, and he said, "You're a lawyer. You have to be able to look. You've got to get used to this now. You can't not be able to look in the courtroom." And I'm like, "Well, why not?" Like, people know I'm a human being. But then, once I actually did look, I noticed some very important, from a legal perspective, from a defense perspective, some very important aspects of the case. Um, so it's hard to do, but lawyers have to figure out a way to be detached from the horror, from the death, from the victims, and focus on, the defense. And, like you said, it's hard to do. We hear a lot of things in the podcast when you talk about time frames and things of that nature. Uh, Julia 543, also one of our members, had a live question. When was the original podcast recorded? Because people are listening to the remastered re-release of the Gacy tapes. So when they hear you speak to time, when was that initially recorded?
So I started it in, I want to say, that I started it in late 2020. In terms of the concept of doing it, and then we started getting the episodes recorded in early 2021. It took us through all of 21, and we ended up finishing and wrapping it in about 15 months later in 2022. So when we originally put it out, I had the idea of doing the podcast, and I tinkered with the concept of going to a major media company and selling kind of the concept to them, which I think I would have been able to do. But my fear is that they were going to really control the creative side of how I wanted to tell the story. And again, this was my story to tell. I mean, it was my story in terms of, it was my dad's case, and I was telling it from a defense attorney's perspective. And, I didn't really realize as I started it just how much this case had impacted my life. And when I finally finished it, I've told the story before, it's going to be one of the repeats, but when I uttered the last words that I'd written for the last episode of this thing, and like Darren like stopped recording, at least I think he did, I just started weeping. Like, it had such a profound impact. It was like uncontrollable. It turned out to be such a cathartic thing for me, but if I think about the path that my life has taken in terms of, becoming an attorney, my parents being split up, fortunately I wasn't living in Illinois while this trial was taking place because kids are so cruel. I just imagine that I would have taken a bunch of shit in school because everybody knew in Chicago who the lawyers were. And I just could not contemplate having lived here during that. And then, I ended up going to law school after I decided to, initially I was going to not go to law school and I was going to be a social worker. And then I go to law school. I meet my wife at Chicago Kent Law School. That was the beginning of our long and beautiful relationship. And, ultimately in 2019, 2020, when I started thinking about doing the podcast and then we actually start doing it, at that point, I realized, like, this case, had my father not taken the case, I'm not sitting here doing that now. I'm not making this podcast now. Like, all the things that have happened after the podcast was made, starting this YouTube channel, none of this exists if he hadn't sent that Western Union all those years ago. I might not have even gone to law school. It's like, it was a thing that I didn't necessarily feel the passion until I really started law school. When I started law school, and I was like, yeah, this is the thing that I want to do. But yeah, it had a very profound impact on my life. There's no question about it.
All right, let's dive into the last 15 minutes.
I've had people ask me what it is that I hope to accomplish by releasing these tapes after 41 years. Well, it's my sincere hope that they will shed some light, maybe to law enforcement and helping them hone their profiling skills. Maybe to the trial lawyers out there that are using the insanity defense and don't understand its intricacies. Maybe to the families of the victims who may get answers, for whom I am sure have been devastated by this monster's unforgivable acts for decades. And maybe to you, the listeners, as to why this sick and depraved man did what he did to all those young men so many years ago. Understand that at this point in time, while he's being interviewed by my father, he's given not 1 or 2 confessions, but 5 confessions to the detectives that had interviewed him, without the benefit of having his lawyer present. And yes, even serial killers have the right to have their attorney present during questioning. With regards to whether Sam Amoranti was present at the time that Gacy was questioned, is up for debate. Bob Egan, one of the prosecutors, claimed in his opening statement at trial that Amoranti was present for at least 3 interviews. Gacy says he was present for 1. There's an obvious disconnect there, and I will get into this particular topic much more in depth when I have Sam Amoranti on the podcast. But it begs the question, how in the hell did Gacy end up giving these statements to the cops when we know, based on the night he's arrested, that he had retained an attorney, and that attorney had told him to shut his mouth and not say shit to the cops? There's an interview that Gacy gave to Robert Ressler of the FBI back in '92, which Peacock used in their new docuseries, wherein he claims that he never made any of those statements and that law enforcement had no way in proving that he did. They weren't recorded, they weren't videotaped, and they weren't reduced to writing and signed by Gacy. Additionally, there was no written statement by Gacy himself. However, what law enforcement did have in their possession was a hand-drawn map of the crawl space that Gacy drew himself in order to assist the police with locating the bodies that are buried in the crawl space. This is not a general location map, but instead it pinpoints the exact location of all 27 bodies and in the order that they were buried. At some point, in either the 3rd or 4th interview, Gacy realizes what he's done and switches courses completely and states that he in fact did not draw out the map at all, but instead it was his alter ego, Jack Hanley.
To this day, I don't understand why we went and had the conference out there. I more or less gave them more roots, more foundation.
During that conference, did you make it clear, was it made clear that much of what you were saying was conjecture, was things that you had formulated in your mind because of existing circumstances? You come to a certain conclusion. That's the way you talk. I mean, everything that comes out of your mouth it's some kind of a conclusion you form.
Well, just like with Dr. Hartman and Dr. Reitman, I told them the majority of my conversation with them has been purely on hearsay, not things stating that I've actually done them. Things that I stated to them that I know of. Well, then how do you know of them if you've never talked to Jack Hanley? I said, well, I don't know. He said, how do you know when you turned into Jack Hanley? I said, I don't know. He said, well, then how do you know in fact there is a Jack Hanley? I said, because I recall using the name. But as to what the hell transpired after, I don't know.
Well, I think Jack Hanley was used, as you said, when you were picking up people. You
Just
didn't want them to know their name.
I didn't want
So
to know my name.
You reflect back on them, on those situations, and assume a Jack Hanley exists. In fact, what's happening is when things are done, you're in some sort of a fugue state, I assume. I mean, a state wherein you'll do complicated things, usually brought on by liquor and drugs. I'm convinced of that. The next day, the body's laying in your living room. You don't remember the specific details. Remember the details up until you start to get buzzed, start to get high. You reach a certain point.
That's why I can remember meeting someone. You know?
You remember using the name. Remember meeting them. Remember where you were going, and then.
But then they come out with the conjecture that I have passed myself off as a police officer and stuff like that. Or they come out with the stuff that I've been in gay bars. I was afraid to go in gay bars because I felt that if somebody ever found out about it, that it would be bad for my reputation.
Do you remember, aside from the first killing that you described to me already, any of the details of any of the rest, aside from
Bukovich?
And you think you're assuming that Bukovich was the second?
Yeah.
He was buried in the garage.
Okay. And I remember getting into an argument with him, but it's not like the way they say. Bukovich was out to my house with 3 others. They came out there. They were drinking. I was drinking. We had drugs. All 4 of them left.
Including Bukovich.
All 4 of them left. Bukovich and his 3 friends. They all left. Okay, because John was doing the driving.
Okay. What happened then?
Okay. I think they left around 10 or 11 o'clock. I think that I either took a nap or still was high enough that I got a notion to go out driving. I went out around midnight. I went down to Buckhouse Square, which was the usual routine. In the process, there was nobody down there, or there nobody that looked right. So I cruised on down Lakeshore Drive, got off at Montrose, was cruising around Montrose Avenue, Lakefront, Foster Avenue, Lakefront. I ran into Bukovich on Lawrence. No, I ran into him actually first. I spotted his car down at Foster Avenue Beach at the Lawrence Avenue exit. Then he had stopped his car at Sheridan and Lawrence. And I pull up, I double parked, I never even parked the car. And I stopped. And he asked me what I was doing. I said, I just out cruising around. He said, I'll ride with you. Now this is after we had just had an argument
An hour ago.
2 or 3 hours ago. Because this had to be around 1 o'clock in the morning. He got into my car. We drove around for a while. Then he wanted something to drink. So I said, well, instead of spending any money, let's go out to my house. We went back out to my house. We drank some more.
In your car?
In my car.
It becomes clear that the gears in his mind are churning and that he is laying the groundwork for some form of mental defect defense. These statements, one of which I have posted at defensediaries.com, were given by Gacy during the 29 hours that he was in custody between December 22nd and December 29th of 78. The taped interviews with his lawyers start in earnest on February 9th of 79. That being said, Gacy had a month and a half to educate, research, and devise a game plan. Keep in mind that he was not being held in Cook County Jail while awaiting trial, which, in case you were wondering, does not have a Brooks Hadlin type of library like at Shawshank. This was due to the very real and highly likely scenario that he would have been killed by another inmate while in custody at Cook County. So instead, he was housed in a cushy suite at Cermak Memorial Hospital, where he did have access to resources such as the DSM-5, which is the equivalent to the anarchist cookbook, except relating to mental disorders as opposed to making homemade explosives. It is at this point that he decides that he will either go with the alter ego theory, that being Jack Hanley, or quite simply that he didn't commit the murders at all. And at worst, he is guilty of illegally disposing of the bodies. It is this moment in time when the preparation of the defense for these crimes becomes a very steep uphill climb for his lawyers, because they have already decided the insanity defense is the only way to defend him.
We drank some more. We smoked a couple of joints. I think the handcuffs were behind the bar. Then he started talking again about that he could kick my ass. Because he was telling me about his problems with his dad, and that he needed the fucking money. I said, that's fine. I said, who's going to pay for the goddamn carpeting? He said, well, just went through it out of the apartment and shit like that. Fuck no. I said, you sticking me for $325, and then you want me to give you a check for $160?
What's the $325? What was the argument about initially?
He had left because he had gotten into it with his dad, and his dad took the apartment away from him. With his dad taking the apartment away from him. But now, meanwhile, the day before, he had just gotten into a fight down on Halston, Ohio Street. No, not Halston, Ohio. Halston, and Halston and Clinton, or somewhere in that area. They had gotten into an argument. In fact, they beat up somebody with a pool stick.
You mean him and his friends?
The Puerto Rican buddies. Yes. Yeah. And he wanted to get out of town because they were going to come and get him. That's why he wasn't going home. His dad had kicked him out of the house. His dad had kicked him out of the apartment. Told him that he was no good and all that shit. And wanted to get rid of him. Just get out. I told somebody's going to have to pay for the carpeting. He charged the carpeting to me, and then his father took the apartment back from him to rent it out, and then he was going to not pay for the carpeting, which was $325. He had a check coming of, I believe, $125 to $150, somewhere in there. He wanted his check. And he said, I can get the carpeting back from his dad. I said, like hell. And I'm going to go argue with your dad. So then he got into an argument. That's what the argument was. The same argument was expressed to his dad. His dad knows it even to this day. John knew he couldn't get his check until he paid the $325 because I told his dad. Then his dad says, well, this was after John disappeared. He said, give me he said, the hell with John, make the check out to Marco. Okay. Like hell I am. Are you going to pay me for the carpeting first? Or I'm going to take the carpeting out. He said, no, you're not. You don't get no carpeting. In his broken English.
So when you got back to the apartment,
no, we went back to your house. I'm sorry. We're drinking and we got into a fight, and then
about the same thing, basically.
It felt like he wanted to fight again. So we were fucking around, arguing back and forth, and I talked him into putting the handcuffs on. Once he got the handcuffs on, I pinned him down, and I told him, I said, now you might as well settle down and get it straight for once and for all, because I am not going to give you a check. I said, I don't give a shit what the hell you do. And then he said, let me up. I said, I ain't letting you up until I get done explaining it. I said, goddamn well you owe me for the carpeting. You're not getting your money until I get mine. And then he told me that if I didn't let him up, or if I would let him up, he'd kill me. Threatened to kill me. He said, if I get loose, I'll kill you. He said, because he had nothing to lose. I said, well, if that's the way you think of it, then it's either you or me. I am assuming from that point forward, I don't remember if I killed him or I just left him on the floor. I do know that he was dead.
When do you remember him being dead?
Around 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning when I came out of my bed. He was still laying on the living room floor.
Did he have his clothes on?
Yep.
Were his hands still handcuffed?
Yep.
In back of him or in front of him?
And back.
When he was dressed.
Yeah.
How was he?
I don't know. I don't know
manner?
if they found him with his clothes on or off. I don't know if I took his clothes off to bury him or buried him with his clothes on.
How was he killed?
So there's a rope on his head.
That clip is from 223 of 1979, and Gacy states that he can't remember the details of the murders, but that Jack Hanley can, again raising the possibility that he is suffering from a multiple personality disorder. My father rejects that notion, stating that he uses the name when he picks up his victims, and then essentially blacks out from the booze and the pills, as opposed to a different personality taking over and committing the dastardly deeds. I would just say this: if Gacy's intent was to kill the victims when he was picking them up, then why go through the charade of using a fake name at all? They certainly aren't going to be telling any of Gacy's secrets. At the end of the day, the victims are dead, whether it's by Gacy's hands or his alter ego's hands. So whoever was correct in their assessment as to what was going on with Gacy doesn't really matter, because the end result was the same either way. Over the course of my life, I've run into countless people that have their own Gacy stories, and we would love to hear from you. If you have a Gacy story, whether it be yourself or a parent or a friend, please email us. We would love to hear your story, and there's a good probability that we would actually have you join us on the show. So please email us with any stories that you may have, or contacts of people that may have stories at defensediaries.com. Join us on the next episode as we examine the disappearance of Gacy's last victim, Robert Piest, and how in 9 days' time, detectives got him in custody permanently. I would be remiss not to shout out to the people who, without their incredibly hard work, this podcast would not have been possible. First and foremost, to my main man, my executive producer, the Wizard of Sound, Darren Wood. Also, producer Marty Fairley, who's been with me from the start and has been instrumental in making this happen. The incredible music that you've heard throughout was written and performed by Taras Horolewski and was mixed by the incomparable Ryan Gack. All the amazing art was created by Alex Carver, and to my partner in all things, who always supports me in everything I do, Allison Motta. And finally, to my dad, Bob Motta Sr., who sired me and gave me the tapes. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, there it is, episode 1.
So I had a question, and now I forget what it was. But it was interesting. You heard Gacy there do what we were talking about early. Like he's rationalizing his kills. He's blaming. Even before he gets to, and you hear him kind of catch himself. He was like, you know, I'm going to kill you. If I get out of here, I'm going to kill you, so that he's like, well, I couldn't let him up because it was him or me. But you saw like, how dare you? How dare you ask me for money when I put carpet in your in your apartment and your dad owes me money? I'm going to now, because you asked me for money, like chain you up and tie you down and like, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. He was a warped guy. There's no question about that. I ultimately, so a couple of the things that you hear in first episode, like Allison had brought up, I end up never playing the tape sound for any of the cops that we interview, anybody. Bill Kunkel, the lead prosecutor, because in my mind, I'm like, that would be a really interesting thing for these guys who hunted this guy down, and the prosecutor who ended up convicting him and getting him sentenced to death, to hear things that they never would have heard in terms of Gacy. And I was interested to hear what their responses would have been. But ultimately, for me, once I started interviewing the cops, like Allison said, it really did take a different direction, especially when I interview Mike Albrecht, because we had interviewed Rafael Tovar, who, if you're watching the series, he's kind of the main character cop. He's the Hispanic cop with the glasses that basically they had doing everything in the series, and that kind of follows the way that he was in his interviews with us. He really was the cop who was taking credit for a lot of things, even though we knew timing wise and from the police reports that he couldn't possibly be in two places at one time. But he was a phenomenal interviewer and an even better person. I loved all the old cops that we interviewed that you'll hear throughout the course of the season, because they were all very open and honest about everything. When I challenged them on the fact that, it seemed very much like at that time in the United States that, anything that was related to, it being a gay on gay crime or dealing with homosexuality, that they simply just didn't care. I mean, you saw that with Dahmer, which was in the 90s. It was still the same mindset. And these guys were all candid about it. And they're like, yeah, that sadly was the case, as fucked up as that is, but that was kind of like our mindset. It just was one of those things, but it wasn't just that. It was like the socioeconomic aspect of a lot of these victims where, they weren't well to do, so they just didn't rank in terms of importance to the police, especially the Chicago police, who I am very, very hard on in this podcast. I mean, I flamethrow the Chicago Police Department because their utter failure in doing their jobs allowed Gacy to continue to operate for years when they should have gotten him much, much earlier on. I argue that they should have gotten him after Bukovich, that they had everything that they needed. Had they done any modicum of investigation, that they would have gotten him after Johnny Bukovich, who was either his second or third victim.
All right, so no spoilers. Stick to episode 1 here, my man.
Yeah.
But we talked about Gacy being able to rationalize every one of his victims. And you're going to hear that, later on in the tapes. But even he admitted he could not rationalize Robert Piest. And that was the only other time you heard him have a sense, like a hint, I guess, of remorse, in the sense that he really couldn't rationalize it, the way he could the others in his own sick, demented way,
Yeah.
So I
I
think
mean, I think, at the end of the day, I came to the realization by the time that 78 rolls around, and he was incredibly active in terms of his crimes from 76 to 78, when, I know, and I get heavy into David Cram and Michael Rossi, in case you're wondering, in this podcast, who were two guys who worked with him, two young guys who worked with him, and who both lived with him for about, anywhere from 4 to 6 months apiece, separately in that house during the time that Gacy was most active. And
when there were bodies laying around,
it's one of those things. And I asked Kunkel flat out, how those guys weren't charged and why they weren't charged. And, Bill didn't really have a great answer. You guys will hear it on the podcast. I interviewed Bill Kunkel a few times, as he was gracious enough to come on, because, I wanted to get the full story. It was very important. There is nothing that exists on the planet other than this podcast that gives you the in-depth investigation that we did on this case. And it's, like I said, Gacy, for me, is like a specter. He's amorphous. He's not the focus of the podcast. He's really not, even though we're listening to the tapes. So that may seem like it's counterintuitive. The podcast isn't about him. I really wanted to dig into the investigation because I wanted to know. I wanted to know how they were able to get him after these 10 days, wherein, again, Chicago just shit the bed for 6 years, because it was a misnomer that Gacy wasn't on their radar. This guy had been, aside from Jeff Rignall, who was, kidnapped and tortured in his little garage shed for days on end, completely like chloroformed over and over and over and sexually assaulted and, then left out on the street. And he goes into the Chicago Police Department and, saying this guy's a monster. This guy did this to me. And they're like, oh, well, sorry, we can't help you out. Do you know who he is? So
And again,
Rignall,
that'll be in later
yeah, but
episodes.
like I can talk about some of it. I think we're going to do some more of these. People seem to
We'll
really
see.
like this. Well, no,
I want people to listen to the podcast.
but if it draws them to the podcast through the YouTubes, it might be worth doing it. But we'll
All right.
talk
Well,
about
look at there. There we have At the Scales of Justice saying, please do all the episodes as commentaries because it's very special to hear your experience. So
I've seen a lot of comments in here. So, one of the things that is critical in listening to this podcast is there is little to no like fluff. It is very densely packed. I am firing through the facts of this case in almost every episode. I in order to make it, more of a story, I add some things like I spend a fair amount of time because I always thought it was a funny thing about how old all the cops, if you're older, you remember this old Mattel handheld football game that I played psychotically when I was like that age. And it had just come out. It was just dashes and, it was this like little thing and you'd have to like it wasn't the graphics obviously weren't like anything that we're used to now, but back then, but all these cops that were sitting on the surveillance played that game, and had matches against one another. And it was something that struck a chord with me because at that time, in my life when I was a young boy, that was something that I had played at the same time that they were conducting this investigation. So that little thing really resonated with me. So, I try to pick things that had an impact on my life as well, that I would kind of incorporate into the narrative. But this isn't a podcast where you can kind of, and I'm guilty of it all the time. Like I'm listening to a podcast if I'm walking Nanook and I've got a podcast on and I just start thinking about something else. And then I'll realize I've missed 6 minutes of the podcast because I was in my mind, I was thinking of something. So I just wasn't listening. And I'm like, oh shit, this podcast, you can't do that. You will unequivocally miss things in this podcast if you don't listen very carefully. And I know that that's hard to do sometimes. I know that that's hard to do. And, episode 8, which I see a lot of people talking about how they listen to, that's where I kind of unleashed the thing
spoilers.
that I'm not. That episode's out. That
I
episode's
know,
out.
but
I just want people to know that for the next 2 episodes, I go much deeper into it because I got a lot of tweets about the episode in terms of what I talk about with the receipt and, where they're claiming that it was found. And I just want to be clear. I do not believe that it was found in the outdoor garbage either.
all right, babe, no more spoilers.
Yeah. Well, that's
I
coming
know
out.
it's out, but there's many people that we're assuming are just going to be starting from here. So no more.
Yeah, that's
Look,
that's
I'm
true.
going to have to chastise you. I might have to come up there and spank you.
Okay, babe.
Hey, oh, Allison.
Oh, sorry. But
right,
I want to get to real quick. We've got another one of our members, MBW007, who asks if you had any luck getting Bob Sr. to record with you. So just to answer that, he had agreed yes. And then as Bob sort of said, I mean, this was still close in time to the episodes coming out. And then he was like, I don't think I can. I don't like talking about it. And then he agreed yes again. So we just have to get him while his yes is yes. And I think we're going to be able to make it happen.
Yeah, I do too. Sounds like he's come to the realization that he should do it, and he should. It's because going into it, honestly, I was really, there were 2 people that I thought that were shoo-ins in terms of me interviewing because I had to hunt down all these old cops, which was not easy. I mean, everybody that you're hearing that I was able to get on the podcast were people that I hunted down. Like I see Monkey in here in the chat, saying that he had a near death experience with Gacy. I was able to. A lot of people reached out during the podcast. We feature many of them later in the season.
We vetted them.
We vet them, because you'd be surprised how many people. This is one of those cases, especially if you're in Chicago, that the amount of people that have some kind of connection to this case is stunning.
But
Which
speaking
goes,
of which, if there are people who haven't reached out before, who are just hearing about Buried now and didn't know about the Gacy tapes and have such a story, please reach out to us, and we can still feature your story in a bonus episode on a YouTube live, as we're doing now, that's going to get converted into an episode. We really, want to share those stories. And again, if anyone has people missing, who know
yes,
of families who have people
yes,
missing, who went missing during this time frame, email us. I have to make sure we still that phone number that we still receive the calls to it. I think that we do. We have a phone number on the podcast for people to call if they think that they may have known someone or had a family member of someone who went missing around that time that may have been a victim. Um, I'm sure that number still comes to us, so I'll have to double
yeah,
check
it
that.
does.
But
Or the email. It's that is something. And if you've just found our channel, I have a series of interviews with a former Chicago cop named Bill Dorsch, who we fully intend on what we would classify as a second season of Buried, wherein we are actively searching for additional Gacy victims, because as you listen to this podcast, you will realize as it progresses that one thing that was never done in any capacity with the John Wayne Gacy investigation is beyond what the victims they found in the house and the victims they found in the river, that they never investigated the concept that there were more anywhere at all. None. There was no investigation done. So I've taken upon myself in this weird kind of reversal of roles wherein, my father defended the guy and I'm out here trying to advocate for the victims of this guy, because I believe firmly that there are more victims. I believe that those victims and their families deserve to know, and they deserve to have their names back. And I am going to do everything in my power to make sure that we do what we set out to do. And, that's going to be a very, very intense endeavor for sure, but if you haven't listened to those with Bill Dorsch, who has his own Gacy stories, which are incredible, I highly recommend you go back. You'll find them in our lives. And there's many of them. And Dorsch is an unbelievable guy. And he's a true advocate, and he is somebody who has been, and he was one of the people that found me through when we first released it, before we rebranded it and remastered it. He found me through the podcast, and he's gotten irritated with me because I'm so all over the place in terms of content, and he's anxious to get to do, or get to doing what we intend on doing. So, Bill gets mad at me and then he'll quit talking to me for a while, but I feel pretty confident that I'll be able to get Bill back on board, and we'll be able to get busy with what we intend on doing.
all right, so we are going to end the live episode at this point. Before we do, I want to thank our
Wait,
members
there were a lot more questions.
and our.
Hold
Well,
on.
my plan was to end it and then answer. I was about to say that, and then we'll answer
Oh,
some more
well,
questions, unless there are ones that you thought needed to be answered live.
I mean, there's some decent ones. Like Cody had asked, how do you answer the department mess up after the parole switch to Chicago? I mean, Gacy being the manipulative person that he was, in terms of him obviously being convicted in Iowa, and that's where his parole was obviously set up, and then he applied to have it moved to Illinois on the basis that his mother was sick and that he had to take care of his mother, and that, she had a home in Illinois, and that his intention was to live with her and care for her. So ultimately, after getting out after 1.5 years when he had a 10-year sentence, and obviously we know what he goes on to do. It's just one of those things where, what should have been and what wasn't, and the end result was obviously unthinkable. But it's if you look at a lot of these serial killers out here that were able to operate for extended periods of time, and if you start to really dig into those cases and what law enforcement was doing at that time, you begin to see a pattern, whether it was just incompetence or indifference or a combination of both. That is a common theme with a lot of these guys that operated in the 70s and in the 80s and even in the 90s. We've seen from Dahmer that he should have been arrested long before he was. They had, and it was always the same kind of thing. They would get Gacy in a police station after somebody complained that he had battered them or assaulted them, and he'd just say, "Look, I'm going to be honest here. I'm going to be frank. It was a consensual sexual thing that we were into, and it just, it got a little." Got a little physical, but it was always consensual. And the cops are looking at each other like, all right, well, sounds good, man. We'll call it a day on that. And like,
Yeah,
that
they're like,
was
"Oh,
what they
wait,
would say.
what are you guys talking about here? Okay, all right, yeah. We can't hear this. We're out. We get it. Okay, it was a gay thing."
Yeah, right. It was just fucked up. So yeah, all right. And then, yeah, let's do your ending thing, and then we'll answer what else is left.
Well, so I was just saying that I just wanted to thank our members and our patrons, and just know that if there's a lot of material up on Patreon that are patron only access, as our, commercial free episodes. But beware, if you're just joining Patreon, don't listen to the Gacy tapes episodes. Those are not the remastered episodes, and wait and listen to the buried episodes as they drop. And then, Bob, what do you want to say in closing?
Yeah, it's exceptionally important to us in terms of getting this podcast out to the world. I think it's of the quality that it deserves to be heard by the world. I don't know that when I'm looking through the top 50 podcasts, many of which I've listened to, I don't know that there's any that are better than this. And it's you folks are the ones who make that possible, because without you guys following, subscribing, rating it, if you've listened and you're enjoying it, leaving a review, those little things that you can do to help us get the word out and help Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google or anywhere you listen to your pods know that this is a podcast that should be listened to people. You guys are the ones that do that, So my big ask for you is, if you could take a couple of minutes just to do that, download the pods. You'll get them. They'll drop into your podcast feed every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. You'll get the new episodes, and you'll be able to listen at your leisure. But I can't impress upon you enough how much that helps us, and it's free. It's something that you could do if you appreciate the work that we've put into this podcast, and obviously with our YouTube show. Everything that we try to do to keep you guys all entertained, educated, and informed on what's going on, and trying to, make it in a way that it's entertaining for you. If you appreciate that, this is a small gesture that you can do for us that really, really goes a long, long way in terms of helping us get Buried out to the world. So
Yes, and with Buried being so new, literally every single review, rating, 5 stars, all the listens, they really make a huge impact right now. Every single one makes a huge difference. So we appreciate those of you who have followed, subscribed, given 5 stars, and we'll appreciate all of those who will.
Yes. Yes.
So hang around if you're live, and if you're not, we will see you next time. We will do more bonus episodes. We might do more listening parties. We'll figure it all out. And thank the people one more time, babe.
All right, you guys, we love you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you a million times over. To all our patrons and our members over on our YouTube channel, we adore you. We couldn't do this without you. We couldn't keep the lights on without you guys. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, always, every single day. That's a continuing feeling that Allison and I have towards all of you, because you guys are an amazing community that we've built here. And, without you guys, I quite literally would just be an old man.
Talking about an old case.
Indeed.
All right. So that's the official end of the podcast. So let's go to, there were some supers. There were some other questions. We've got Cody in Tennessee. Oh, I'm here for this. Bob and Allie, thank you. Member for 6 months. We appreciate that.
Love
I
it.
talked about Gigi. Thank you. Pixie says, Bob, you definitely have a podcast voice. It's like the phone voice back when we used to have landline phones. Love you both. Buried is amazing. I am hooked.
Thank you.
You
Pixie.
definitely have your podcast voice.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I love it. I mean, I honestly have many, many times. And now that I'm listening it to again, I'm doing it again. Been like, I can't sleep. I'm going to put on the podcast, both because it's interesting. And then Bob just soothes me to sleep when I can't fall asleep.
We are listening to this as they drop as well.
Yeah,
Allie
because
and I-
there's so much that we forget, that I forget. Even you forget. You wrote it. You wrote it and recorded it.
Crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. Like, for instance, we were down in the city. We went to a couple of Dumpster Funk shows on Halloween night and the night after that. And then, we'd have little after parties. And then when episode 8 had dropped on Saturday, Allie and I were like, okay, we're going to save this for when we sneak off and go to bed tonight. And then we'll listen to it when we went to bed. Allie fell asleep 12 minutes in. I powered through most of it, but yeah, it's,
Then I listened again when I woke up at 6 a.m. Tried to fall back to sleep.
I hadn't heard it with the new mastered, the mastered tape sound, which is, to me, amazing. It's a completely different experience for me, because it's like when we dropped it the first time, I knew that the quality, especially on some of the tapes, was of such a poor quality that I knew that it was diminishing the overall power of the podcast. And now I feel like we've got everything where it needs to be. And I think that it's just an experience that people will find to be much different than any other podcast you've ever listened to. It's just, It hits different. It's just a different thing.
All right. So Nick Starrow says, should I trademark, quote, A. Holman, including the likeness?
Yeah, Nick, you should. I did. Nick and I were on with Andy Kelpsa today. We did a nice live with her, and we had a blast doing it. And Nick put on his A. Holman costume, so to speak, a little mask. You have to go watch Andy's live to see what it is, because words won't do it justice.
So were you aware of David Norenberg?
No, I don't know. Was he CPD or was he Displains, Deanna?
I feel like if she's still here, she's going to say CPD, because I don't remember his name in the Displains police reports. But
yeah, I mean, he could have been one of those guys that wasn't necessarily one of the detectives or one of the surveillance guys, but another guy that, I mean, it was all hands on deck, because that was a smaller department. So, there are guys that may not have been writing up reports that were still out there working the job for sure. And even more that were down there in terms of the digging, when that was taking place.
And you had put this up before, Deborah Gillespie.
Yeah. Thank you so much. 5
Defense Diaries memberships. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Brooklyn Pisola, member for 13 months. Thank you.
Ride or Die Mod, who we love.
Bob's not talking. Can we get a thumbs up? Yeah, you forgot to tell people, give thumbs up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, get thumbs up always to the lives.
Thanks, Brooklyn. MBW007, 007 also gifted 5 memberships. Thank you. All right, so Debbie Olander 8039 says, "Can we see the interview with Bob?" What is that? Cocole?
Bob Cocole and partner. Debbie, re-ask. I don't understand the question.
And Mandy, if you see it, start so I can find it. So Curious Liz, thank you, says the UK has the Holmes AI system that they use to investigate Jack the Ripper. Would be amazing to use something like that for Gacy to track down potential additional victims. What the hell? Do you know about this? The Holmes AI system?
No.
The hell? We're
Sounds
gonna have to look into that, Liz.
Yeah.
Figure out what that's all about. Does sound
Yeah.
interesting. Does sound interesting.
Travis had asked Bob, talk a little bit about their questions of John Wayne Gacy in this interview. Where do they think they were going? I think it's fascinating. What were you wearing? What are they wearing? What car? Yeah, I mean, my father, in terms of the first probably 4 or 5 times he went to see Gacy, was literally going through the reports that Albrecht had written, where he kind of somewhat transcribes the confessions. All right. So he's got these 5 confessions, and my father is picking these things apart because by the time my dad starts grilling Gacy in terms of preparing him for the case, Gacy's got this thing where he's like, "Oh, I don't remember what I was saying. Like I don't remember telling the cops any of this shit." And my dad's calling bullshit on him, and he's saying, "Well, it's." And I don't want to give a spoiler because that comes later in the season, kind of where my father's really, going at Gacy really hard. But I mean, ultimately, my dad was picking his brain in order to try to figure out whether or not Gacy was full of shit. He was testing his memory as to certain things, because you'll listen to certain Gacy tapes and the guy had a near photographic memory. Like, this guy could remember random addresses for businesses wherein, he would.
Yeah, I mean, he was remembering what people were wearing and like his, like
Right.
clothing they had on, what corner he was on.
Which is why my father knew he was completely full of shit.
Right.
It's like the guy remembered every detail about everything, and was conveniently forgetting about the things that mattered most in terms of preparing the defense.
Elizabeth Myers, which it must also be Curious Liz based on the
Yeah.
photo, says, "I'll email what I know about it to you guys." Oh, about Jack the Ripper. All right.
I do still have the tapes. They are definitely in my possession.
So the other thing I wanted to say that I forgot to talk about when we were still, recording the episode, is that as we go on, and those of you who listen to the Gacy tapes probably know this, but you got to listen all the way till the end. There's becomes like a little, what do you call that? Like when they give a little thingy, there's like a term for it. A golden nugget, but I can't think of the words.
I missed the first part. I was reading comments.
Like when you're listening to the episode at the end, there's a little golden nugget. What do you call that?
Like a teaser?
No, like
cliffhanger?
No. Like when you have a secret room in a game.
Oh, like a Easter egg?
Yes, there's a little Easter egg at the very end of the episode.
Oh yeah.
It comes sometime after 8, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
which I loved. I wanted to use it for all
I
the
know, I
ends
loved
of
it too.
Yeah, it was
It's
so
so
great.
good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Darren came up with that.
Yeah, he certainly did. So Cody asked off episode, but did Gacy actually tell the cops it was their jobs to figure out how many he killed? Nah, not really. Like there was the story, they used it in the Devil in Disguise, wherein he's driving Gacy either back and forth to the courthouse or he's driving him to Cermak Hospital, one of the two. And Tovar tells us the same story in our actual interviews with him, where he is, he's telling the story. He gets into this conversation with Gacy, and he lands on this thing where Gacy says, 45 sounds like a good number. So whether or not that actually happened, if you're to believe Tovar, then it happened. I mean, could I see Gacy saying that? Possibly.
Right, but Tovar did not. That's not the story that Tovar told you personally. That he said it's your job to figure it out.
No, that part. That's not the part. Yeah,
That was
I don't think that happened.
right.
All right. Let's see. We got. Did you do MBW?
Yep, I did all the supers.
All right. Thank you.
The very few of them that we got here.
Okay, and
then what all 900 of you can do instead of sending us a super, just hop on whatever podcast you listen to, give us 5 stars. You just heard an episode on Spotify. Get a listen for like a couple minutes before you can, couple seconds really, before you can click that 5-star review. And on Spotify,
543 says, will you consider using the YouTube podcast as the platform to release it on? I don't have the others. I mean, if we don't do a bunch of them in this fashion, kind of like a listening party Q&A type thing, I think ultimately what we might end up doing, but we'll put it on a separate channel than this channel, because we still think unless we can somehow, and I know Spitfire had sent me an idea with respect to creating some kind of video, that would just, while the episode's playing, just to keep people engaged. Because that thing that happened, Darren did it with the first 2 episodes, I think, back in the day, where he got creative and created them. But we'll think about it. We don't want it hurting the channel.
Here's the thing. I actually was going to tell you this, babe, that we do have to figure out how to get them, just the regular episodes, on YouTube as a podcast. And I do think we'll probably keep it on this channel because we don't want to have to deal with 2 channels. So we're going to figure it out. I don't think putting up the episodes will change it. People apparently still love and want to have these commentary episodes. So we'll keep doing them.
Yeah, for sure. And then Marissa and Chu, Defense Diaries pod, is Bob Sr. really traumatized by it, or is he just camera shy and sick of talking about it? I imagine both. I think it's probably a little bit of both.
It's definitely a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
I told the story about him crying given his opening, and he's definitely not camera shy, but men can be vain.
Yeah, he's not
a very proud man, and does not like the way he talks now, the way he looks now. He's not confident in his ability to answer questions like he would want to. So there's definitely some of that as well. But the other day when he kind of changed his mind and was like, no, I'm not going to do it. That was traumatized Bob Sr. Not, I just don't want to do it, Bob Sr.
Yeah.
So definitely both. Definitely.
And we got a $10 Venmo. Thank you. Karma is a patient gangster. Thank you very much, Karma. We appreciate that Venmo. We love Venmos.
Right. And one thing you guys can look at, if you really, if a whole slew of you really do go onto your podcast and rate this, listen to it, download it again on Spotify, you click the little settings wheel and you can click it to automatically download. But if you do that, you will watch, especially on podcast app, you can watch Defense Diaries move up in its ratings. Right now we're in the top 200. We were in the top 50s. We've moved down to like the top 137. It will move up as you guys start to do that.
Yeah.
So,
and
you can watch it climb.
I've got a couple of things going on that I'm really excited about that I figured I'd mention here. So Michael Chernus, who plays Gacy in this series, I just talked to him today, and he has agreed to come on the show. So I think that's going to be a fascinating interview with the actor who played Gacy and who I thought did a phenomenal role. I'm hoping to get that thing set up here in the next week or so. So keep your eye out for that. I will obviously have Mandy prepare a thumbnail ahead of time and try to promote that so that you all know about it ahead of time. I think it'll be a really, really fascinating interview. And I had interviewed him with Tony Bruschi, but I didn't really get in as much stuff as I would have wanted to. And we didn't get to talk as much as I think both of us wanted to because they had limited time. So I think that will be a really, really excellent live. And I've also reached out. I know that Annie Elise was doing some Gacy stuff, and she had recently dropped an episode, and I reached out to her, and I don't know if Will's still here, but I had a couple of friends reach out to her, Will being one of them, and Brandy Churchwell being another one of them, saying, "Hey, you should really have Bob Motta on. We think it would make for amazing content. He knows everything about Gacy and the case." So, and she has agreed to do that. So that will be huge for us. She has a massive audience. And so I'm really excited about that. I'll let you guys know when we get that thing set up. I know she's traveling this week. So hopefully that's going to get done in, the next couple of weeks, because I think that will really shed or put the podcast in a lot of people's ears in terms of them knowing that it exists. That's always the challenge. It's always the challenge. Letting
All right,
people
answer
know.
Leah's question. And before you do, I just want to say I just checked. We're now at 127 on podcasts. You guys can see what your what your follow, subscribe, rate, 5-star, hopefully, does, and how it moves up just because of y'all.
Yep. You guys are the ones. Yes, they did. They did find Rob Peace's body. Sadly, his parents had to struggle through months of them not finding him because that was a particularly brutal winter in Chicago, and the Des Plaines River had frozen over. So it wasn't until late spring when the river thawed that they were able to discover his remains. So,
and you'll hear a story in the podcast that they never actually told in the, well, you'll hear many, but specifically about where Gacy was and things that he did, in those days right afterwards. I forget what episode that's in, but it's coming up.
Yeah, it is. It's coming up. So yeah, there are 33 plus 3. So 33 is 3 parts because we wanted to, in memoriam of the victims, keep it at 33 because that's 33 known victims of Gacy. And I just couldn't finish the podcast in 33. So we had to do 33 in 3 parts. So I wasn't changing that. So it's technically 36, but it's 33 in 3 parts.
Right. 33 part 1,
It's
33
epic.
part 2, and
Epic.
33 part 3.
It is an epic.
I had chills. I literally had chills. And I've told this story before. And for those of you who are new and haven't heard it, I'll just tell it again. That I was like, I had listened, like I knew my husband's doing a podcast. So I tried listening to a bunch of podcasts. I got irritated by so many people's voices turned me off. There were like a lot of the banter stuff. Like I would not like one person or another, or I think it was bantering too much, or I'd hate the voice. And I was captivated from beginning to end of every single episode. And I said to myself, and like to my friends, it's like, I thought to myself, am I captivated because it's my husband's voice and I'm just drawn to his voice and that's why I'm captivated? And I, like, being honest with myself, was like, no, it's fucking captivating from beginning to end. It's fucking captivating from beginning to end. And I'm not just saying that. So, and I hope you guys feel the same. And I can't imagine that you don't. And like Bob said, it's like, there's just no like dull, like low times, like dull times. Oh, like whatever he's saying right now is boring. It's captivating from beginning to end. And I just think it's amazing. And I hope that you guys will too.
Yeah. Bye, Tracy. We love you. Thank you for everything you do. She's going to walk the puppy.
All right.
Yeah. And then Cody had asked, did your dad first chair? I think technically Sam would have been first chair because Sam was hired initially. And the reason that kind of relationship between Amarante and Gacy took place is because Sam had done some contract work for Gacy, not related to any kind of criminal cases, but just kind of like through his his contracting business, he needed some contracts drawn up. He needed Sam to look at other things. So, and Sam was also going to use Gacy as a contractor to redo his bathroom, which I guess never happened. But so they had a relationship. My dad became involved very, very early on. So he was probably within the first 4 days of Gacy's arrest. Yeah, they made it seem a lot longer in the TV show. That just wasn't accurate. You know, he was on board pretty quickly. So, and then how long was Gacy in custody before your dad joined the defense team? So yeah, it was for a short period of time.
All right. Thank the people one more time.
All right, you guys. And I see some of you already saying you subscribe to Spotify and you've followed it, and Apple. Thank you so much for that. We really, really appreciate that. More than you know. Truly, truly. So mods, thank you so much for hanging with us tonight. We will be back tomorrow. I was originally supposed to have Gigi of what the hell is Gigi's thing? God damn it. I
You're
forget.
having a perimenopause moment?
Yeah,
Oh
it's
my goodness.
I think it's Pretty Lies and Alibis.
There you
So
go.
there you go. So but her Grammy had a fall.
Oh,
And it turned out that she ended up breaking her leg and
Oh.
dislocating her knee. So she's not doing any shows this week. So Gigi will be on with me. We're going to be handling Corey Richins.
and we'll also send all of us, all 900 of us listening, sending healing vibes to Gigi's
Yes.
grandma. A fall
Yes.
like that at an older age is rough.
Indeed.
So the
Indeed.
power of the masses.
Yes, the
vibes.
healing vibes. So, and then, yeah, so again, mods, thank you so much. And to all you guys, we just adore you. Thank you to our members who just are the lifeblood of this channel. Our members are everything. And we know we have to start doing more stuff for our members. We are well aware of it. We've got to do those special things for you that make you guys feel the love that we have for you, because we do have that love for you. But for all of you that are new to the channel, that are old timers, that maybe can't afford to become members, we love you guys too, because you guys are the backbone of the channel, the backbone of the community. And we just adore all of you, because bottom line is, without you guys, I would literally just be an old man.
Talking about an old case.
That is the truth. Bye.